Okay, so welcome back, folks. I wasn't planning this, but because really, you know how I feel about these castings, and I've ranted about this here before. Two videos, one on Jodie Turner-Smith portraying British Queen Anne Boleyn, and another on Queen Charlotte, who is portrayed in Bridgerton by a biracial black woman. There's also obviously a Bridgerton prequel that stars young Charlotte portrayed as a biracial actress. So I've given my opinions about how I feel about these things, but new controversy, same topic. Egyptians complain over Netflix depiction of Cleopatra as black. So you might have seen the trailer for the new Cleopatra documentary. I kid you not, documentary for Netflix. It's produced by Jada Pinkett Smith, wife of Will Smith, beleaguered Will Smith. But in the Netflix documentary, Cleopatra is portrayed by this actress, I believe her name is Adele James, as the Egyptian ruler. And at the very beginning of the documentary, it's not a documentary, so let's be honest here. It's absurd because documentary implies factual real life, and she's portrayed by a mixed race black British actress, Adele James. In it, you can hear a black woman saying, "My grandmother always told me Cleopatra was black, and nothing can make me think otherwise." Something like that. Sadly, this is an attitude that many black Westerners grow up with. Myself included, growing up, believed Cleopatra was a black woman, but the evidence just doesn't pan out. The belief that Cleopatra was a black woman is rooted in the belief that no one knew who her mother was. But as I've said before in the video on Queen Charlotte, the first video, in the absence of what we don't know, we stick to what we do know. We do know that the Ptolemies were of Macedonian, Greek, and Persian heritage, and that they ruled Egypt for 300 years. Cleopatra VII was the last of the Ptolemaic dynasty. And you know, while I'm very skeptical that you can live in a place with a mixed race population and be pure-blooded, especially for 300 years. This is why I normally laugh and roll my eyes at people who they find out they have ancestry in from certain other groups that mysteriously shocks them, even though they come from a part of the world that is racially mixed. I mean, if you're coming from some country in Latin America, like say Cuba, and you are shocked that you have black ancestry, like what is wrong with you? Your ancestors have been there for 500 years and you expect to be pure-blooded. But anyway, you know, the thing is with Cleopatra, they were incestuous. How far back the incest goes, it's not clear, but my understanding is they've been incestuous for a long time. So father marries daughters, aunts, uncles, sister, and brother and sister. Cleopatra herself was married to her own brother before she got rid of him. But again, these were incestuous people descended from Macedonian Greeks and Persians. These were not black people. So why does this persist? Why does this blatant disregard for fact persist? Well, it turns out, you know, I think people are tired of this. They're tired of this in the same way they were tired of, you know, a black woman portraying Anne Boleyn, and tired of the Black Queen Charlotte narratives, because none of this is true. And I think because the world has gotten mad with wokeness over the last, I would say, 8 years, I think this is the turning point. I think there's a revolt. There's a backlash against a lot of this. And it's leading the way is Egypt. So apparently Egypt, a lawyer has filed a complaint that accuses African queens, Queen Cleopatra. So this is a series that Netflix is doing called African Queens, and they're portraying Cleopatra as a black woman. My fear is that Queen Charlotte will also be included in this. This is just messed up, but they're violating, I'm not sure if this lawsuit is going to go any place. A top archaeologist insisted Cleopatra was light-skinned, not black. But the producer said her heritage is highly debated, and the actress playing her told critics, if you don't like the casting, don't watch the show. Well, if only it was that simple. Erasing people's history, and they need to shut up about it. So Adele James made the comment on Twitter post, Cleopatra was born in the Egyptian city of Alexandria in 69 BC and became the last queen of the Greek-speaking dynasty founded by Alexander the Great's Macedonian general Ptolemy. The identity of Cleopatra's mother is not known, and historians say it is possible as she or any other female ancestor was an indigenous Egyptian or from elsewhere in Africa. Again, even if the mother was an indigenous Egyptian, this does not mean that the mother was black. And I've seen this kind of logical fallacy. Well, the person was born in Africa. That makes the person black. You know, it's the same nonsense we see with like Queen Charlotte, who is believed to be black because she had an ancestor 500 years removed who was described in text as either Moor or Mozarab. Again, while there are people of indigenous African heritage described and called Moors, not all the Moors were black. There were Moors who were as black as, I don't know, Akon, and there are Moors who were as pale skinned as Zinedine Zidane. So again, calling someone being Moor doesn't automatically means the person is black. Even if her mother was of indigenous Egyptian heritage, it also doesn't mean the mother was black. And again, in the absence of what we don't know, we stick to what we do know. They were incestuous. Is it feasible that her mother could have been a black Egyptian woman? Yes. But do we know that for certain? No. So Netflix companion website Tudum reported in February that the choice to cast Adele James, a British actress of mixed race heritage, as Cleopatra in a new documentary series, was a nod to the centuries-long conversation about the ruler's race. Jada Pinkett Smith, of course, producing. Yeah, of course it was. Now, this is probably not shocking. The Cleopatra director is also running her mouth on this. You know, what bothers you so much about a black Cleopatra? Because it's not true, because it's pandering, because it's dishonest, because it is creating a false history. I remember as a kid seeing Elizabeth Taylor play Cleopatra. I was captivated, but even then I felt the image was not right. Was her skin really that white? Elizabeth Taylor was of English descent. She was born in England to American parents, but her ancestry was of English descent. Cleopatra was born in Egypt to Macedonian, Greek, and Persian families, like her of that heritage. So in hindsight, Cleopatra probably would have been closer to Elizabeth Taylor. Even so, I wouldn't have described Cleopatra as white, because this is not how people of the ancient world saw themselves. The Greeks clearly did not. They separated themselves racially from, say, the Germanic peoples of Europe, the Anglo-Germanic types. They saw themselves as a race apart. So I wouldn't describe Cleopatra as white. I would describe her as Macedonian Greek with some Persian heritage. Now, you can do your best intelligent, guess and figure out what she would have looked like comparing to people of that heritage. So I thought the actress who portrayed Cleopatra in the HBO series Rome did a really, really good job. So was she as pale as Elizabeth Taylor? No. But would Elizabeth Taylor be a farther reach to play Cleopatra than, say, the biracial mixed race actress currently portraying her? Probably. It's not clear. Born in Iran, I am a Persian, and Cleopatra's heritage has been attributed at one time or another to the Greeks, the Macedonians, and the Persians. She has some Persian heritage that is well known. The Asian Seleucid dynasty, which I've seen African Americans online claiming was a black dynasty. It was not. The Seleucid were, in fact, Persian. And yes, they intermarried. So Cleopatra would have been, as I've said, Macedonian, Greek, and Persian heritage. But the family has been in the country for 300 years, so the chances of them being pure-blooded anything is very, very slim. She was Egyptian by nationality, but not by culture, although I think she was the first of the Ptolemaic people to speak Egyptian, saying that she was no more Greek or Macedonian than Rita Wilson or Jennifer Aniston. Both are one generation from Greece. Again, it's somewhat problematic because even though they were 300 years removed, they remained speaking Greek, the Greek language. As I said, Cleopatra was the first of her family to learn Egyptian. They continued to speak Greek. and they continue to practice Greek culture. By all accounts, Cleopatra was the first to really immerse herself into Egyptian culture. A lot of the times it was done for aesthetics. So it's questionable. It's like saying, it's just the reason why many British people in China are expats, because even though they moved to those parts, they maintain their British heritage and culture. So it's not accurate to say, well, they were Chinese, because they never assimilated into the culture of the Chinese. So you can't just call them Chinese. You have to call them British, because that is what they maintain. They send their children to British schools. They maintain their British heritage, language, culture, and every aspect of their British life. They never learned a native language, so the Ptolemies were very similar. So yes, I would say it's fair to call them Greek or Macedonian. What a political act. And there lies the problem. It's political. It's political, and that's why the backlash is coming. It's political. They're telling you that this is being done as part of a woke narrative, a narrative to empower certain groups who are deemed to be marginalized. Gal Gadot, dear God. So do I even want to click on this link? But let's see what's there. So apparently the uproar, the political, is Cleopatra's African heritage in Netflix documentary series sparks uproar in Egypt. So basically she's clicking to the problem with the Egyptians being very angry about. There was a petition on change.org that was pulled. I wonder why it was pulled, because it gathered a lot of steam from many people signing it to have Netflix remove this mockumentary, because it's not a documentary, because that would imply something factual. But since the ethnic origin of her mother is not known, some historians say it's possible that the Egyptian ruler's mother was African. And I've seen this conspiracy. Many African Americans, because it's overwhelmingly African Americans, then, insert that, well, they're hiding the fact that the mother was black. So we're just going to insert black mother there, which again is absurd. It's absurd, but, it's possible her mother could have been a servant or a low-rank person or someone not related to the family. But again, we don't know this for a fact. Last week's trailer drop for Queen Cleopatra has caused a stir in Egypt, while Zawi Awas, this is a prominent Egyptologist, in every single documentary ever made about Egypt, he's featured. He was quoted as disputing the possibility that Cleopatra was of mixed race. This is completely fake. Cleopatra was Greek, meaning that she was light-skinned, not black. And of course, we spoke about Adele James. Now, I've seen these kind of uproars, and it's like they think that using black people as political pawn is going to do what exactly? Like, what is the point of this? This won't lead to anything good. So what is the point of this? Why shouldn't Cleopatra be a melanated sister? Why do some people need Cleopatra to be white? Her proximity to whiteness seems to give her value. Cleopatra was viewed as white using modern parlance because she's from a culture, a heritage that in modern times would be considered white, Greek, Macedonian. Cleopatra, we found in Adele James, an actor who could convey not only Cleopatra's beauty. Cleopatra was not known for being a great beauty. What she was mainly known for was having a great voice. God. So again, these people tell you it's political. We're doing this. I've seen, again, with Jodie Turner-Smith as Anne Boleyn, where the producers attempted to claim this was about challenging our thinking and our mindset. No, all this does is leads to resentment, it leads to anger, and it leads to a lot of rage. She was probably closer to Elizabeth Taylor than she was to the actress portraying her, but this is absurd. But why is this happening? Why does it keep happening? Who keeps commissioning this? So would you know Ted Sarandos is the CEO of Netflix, one of them, and he's of Greek descent, and he is likely okay with this. Oh, dear God. But worse than that, I think, the problem is white liberals, because they're the ones with the power and they're the ones commissioning this.
Race, British Queen, our city is named after.
Queen Charlotte, of course, is the namesake of our city.
Tom Hanchett, community historian in Charlotte, explains that Queen Charlotte was a German-born princess from Mecklenburg-Strelitz, Germany, to be exact. But her ancestral roots can be traced back to King Alfonso III of Portugal.
Before her German ancestry, she had roots into a Portuguese royal family, the family of King Alfonso III.
Up until the 1100s, there was an Arab and African occupation of Portugal. This is where King Alfonso found his wife, who was a Moor. In those times, the word was used to describe people of Arab or African descent. I spoke with Dr. Tekla Johnson about it.
He sort of marched with his troops into a Moorish-held town called Faro, and he demands the governor's youngest daughter. It wasn't a marriage, it was more like a concubinage, but it was a very high order.
Their son, Martin Alfonso, then marries into a family with African ancestry, further cementing Queen Charlotte's Black heritage.
Remember, in the 1300s, we hadn't yet gone into the slave trade. There wasn't the same stigma that came later on.
Shonda Rhimes puts a Black actress as Queen Charlotte, and now it has everybody talking about history. What do you think about that?
I think it's great. It causes conversations like this one.
Queen Charlotte would go on to marry King George III, the British monarch who lost the Revolution and the colonies.
So he marries a teenager. She's 17 years old.
This 18th century portrait of Queen Charlotte by Sir Allan Ramsay was used as propaganda in the colonies to win over enslaved blacks to Britain during the Revolutionary War. It now hangs in the Mint Museum.
Any schoolchild who comes to the museum remembers seeing that portrait of Queen Charlotte.
In 2007, artist Ken Apgar was commissioned by the Mint to explore Sir Ramsay's portrait of Queen Charlotte. That sparked a dialogue which led to 6 images and a variety of interpretations of the Queen.
Can you talk about what people saw when they saw her portrait?
There are phrases like black, white, other on one of them. There's another one that just says immigrant.
So as you drive around the Queen City and see Queen Charlotte's statue or her portrait, now you'll know a little more about the fascinating history behind the woman our city is named after.
So as you can see, white liberals have been enabling this crap for a long time. And the comments here are pretty freaking base. If Charlotte did have a black ancestor, then the ancestor lived 500 years before Charlotte was born. 500 years. If you call a 99.9% European versus 0.1% Moorish mix, la la la. The ancestor may have been closer to 3, not really, 500. This is just some absurd stuff. This is, again, Moor didn't necessarily mean black. And this is just absurd. This is the kind of story that can only gain traction in a post-truth society. And I've seen, everything from the BBC to the Guardian, like giving airtime to this nonsense. Giving airtime to giving airtime to this nonsense. And then we wonder why this keeps happening. It's because white liberals keep enabling it. But why? Okay, so, there may be a reason why. White liberals present themselves as less competent in interactions with African Americans. A new study suggests that white Americans who hold liberal sociopolitical views use language that makes them appear less competent in an effort to get along with racial minorities. Racial bias can put people of color, blah, 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 at a disadvantage. This is just not a joke. There's less work that explores how well-intentioned whites try to get along with racial minorities. We wanted to know their strategies for increasing connections between members of different racial groups. Warmth related to intentions towards others and competence, related to the ability to carry out those intentions, are 2 fundamental dimensions of how we see others and portray ourselves in social interactions. Stereotypical portrayals of Black Americans generally show them as being less competent than their white counterparts, but not necessarily less friendly or warm, Dupree explained. The team found that Democratic candidates use fewer competence-related words in speeches delivered to mostly minority audience than they did in speech delivered to mostly white audiences. The researchers found that liberal individuals were less likely to use words that would make them appear highly competent when the person they were addressing was presumed to be black rather than white. Oh, dear God. Oh, my God. So, you're probably wondering what is going on. I think people are done. I think people are done with the pandering, the condescension to African Americans primarily. And people are tired of this. It's not accurate. It's the Egyptians this time are doing it on behalf of the Greeks. So apparently the petition gained over 60,000 signatures. The petition gained over 60,000 signatures before it was canceled by change.org. The Netflix documentary produced and narrated by Jada Pinkett Smith. Oh, God. Petition to cancel Cleopatra documentary. Afrocentrism is a pseudoscience that is pushing a group's agenda to claim Egypt's history and rob the actual Egyptians of it. By using false articles and zero evidence, they are still attempting to falsify history. Read the petition's opening description. Cleopatra was born in Alexandria, Egypt, in the Ptolemaic dynasty to Greek descent. She was not black. This is no way against black people and is simply a wake-up call to preserve the history and the integrity of other Egyptians and the Greeks. The show is clearly done to complement the Afrocentric movement, which claims to be the owner of the ancient Egyptian civilization and the Native Americans and the Asians and everybody else that they think, and the Jews, the Black Israelites. There are so many great Black African civilizations, but Egypt is not one of them. They don't care about those other Black civilizations. They just care about Egypt. Archaeologist Flint Dibble disagreed with the notion that casting a Black actor to play Cleopatra mattered. Newsflash from an archaeologist: our ideas of race are modern. There are no genetic distinctions that can separate white and Black people. We overlap, he tweeted. The ancient Greeks didn't see race like you do. Well, I mentioned that, that's why I won't call Cleopatra white. I'll call her Macedonian, Greek, Persian heritage woman. Again, you can make that, conclusion as to what those people look like and how they would be racially classified today. But to use a lot of that modern parlance would just make it more problematic. And, you see the deceptive people like the author. Why does it matter that she's Black? It matters because it's not true. It matters because there are many people who look at this and legitimately believe it and believe there's a conspiracy to hide the fact that she was Black. It's the same thing with Queen Charlotte. It matters. Truth matters. I know we live in a postmodernist dystopia where anything goes. You can say whatever you want. Anything is subjective. But this documentary is passing itself off as history. It's calling itself a documentary. This was not the truth. Cleopatra was not Black. And white liberals need to stop condoning this. They need to stop giving airtime to these types of things because they're not helping any Black people. It does lead to resentment and it does lead to bitterness. And I'm glad many people are pushing back, although already they're trying to claim it's evil right-wing white conservatives. Yeah, the Egyptians are evil right-wing white conservatives. Anyway, let me know what you think about this madness because really it needs to stop. Cleopatra was not Black. Queen Charlotte was not Black. Anne Boleyn was certainly not Black. This needs to stop. All of it. We can do better than this. Stop it.